If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Fraud, a true crime podcast where the weapons aren't knives or guns, but lies and betrayal. I'm Caleb Newquist. How's it going? How's your commutes? How's the laundry? How's the gym? If you're new here, welcome. If you're a regular, nice to see you as always. I am really excited about today's episode. Today, I have an interview with Jonathan Todd Schwartz. Now, who is Jonathan Todd Schwartz? If you are a regular listener to this podcast, then that name might ring a bell. He came up on episode 68, which was one of our Defrauded famous episodes. He was the business manager who stole millions of dollars from a handful of his celebrity clients, including more than $5 million from Alanis Morissette. And we got the opportunity to have him on, and we took it. So I will talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But first, I'm going to read a quick review that came in recently. This one came on YouTube. Yes, YouTube. And it's from Diego. Diego says, "You make fraud cases so entertaining, listening from Belgium." Well, hello from Belgium. I don't know any Flemish. What is it? What is their language? Flemish, right? I have no idea. They speak all kinds of languages in Belgium. But anyway, thanks for listening all the way from Belgium. Tell all your chums in Belgium to listen to the show and to rate the show. Yeah, definitely rate the show. Leave the reviews wherever you listen. Leave a comment, and maybe I'll read it, or send me an email and do it that way if you want me. I'll read your email on air, whatever you prefer. All right. Also, if you are an organization or a conference that needs a live presentation on fraud or ethics, then that is something that I can do. And I can also do it with my former co-host, Greg Kite. For example, we are doing, Greg and I will be at the New Jersey Society of CPAs Convention and Expo on June 5th in Atlantic City. So if you're a CPA and you're in New Jersey or you're Jersey adjacent and want to get in on that, then come see us in Atlantic City in June. Okay? There's a link in the show notes to that Convention and Expo website. Okay. And also webinars. We've done some webinars. The episode on the Sheriff of Fraudingham that came out right at the end of last year was a webinar that we did for More North America. And that was super fun and turned into a pretty good episode. And we can even, not swear, because sometimes people ask us not to do that. So email ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com to get more information on pricing and availability for that. Okay, that's all the business. So without me bandying about anymore about it, let's get to the conversation between me and Jonathan Schwartz. Where did you grow up? Let's start at the beginning. What were your early years like?
I grew up in the Catskills in upstate New York. It was a beautiful place to grow up. Really small little town that was a great tourist attraction for many in the New York City and the boroughs and all over. Hotels were full of life. Bungalow colonies, people would come up in the summer for camp. They'd come up for the summer and weekends. It was just a really beautiful place to grow up. Unfortunately, it's no longer as beautiful as it was. I have fond memories of my childhood, although I have a lot of childhood trauma and I don't recall a lot of my childhood.
Oh, okay. And what did your folks do?
So my father abandoned myself when I was 4, and my younger brother when he is 1. And my mom was forced to take 3 jobs and put food on the table for us and a roof over our heads. And, I really respect my mom very much for all that she did for myself and my brother.
Yeah, man, jeez. That's, do you have any memories of your dad?
I do. They're not very good memories. Like myself, a gambling and cocaine addict and pretty much addicted to anything in my active addiction years. He too struggled with the same gambling and cocaine, and also poor choices, as I've made many poor choices. So we didn't have a great relationship. I didn't see him often till I probably hit 12th grade.
Okay.
Saw him maybe once or twice when I would travel to New York for business. And unfortunately, he passed away in February of 2017, the year that I was sentenced. And I tell you, I miss him now more than when he was alive. And so, for those that have loved ones that are sick, we're not promised tomorrow. And I encourage people to forgive, practice forgiveness, and to reconcile as best one can.
Yeah. Um, so growing up, what were your interests? I guess I'm just curious as your path from, being in a household, with a single mom and, all that kind of entails kind of the uncertainty and just, honestly, struggle, that's definitely a hard way to grow up. So I'm curious as a young person, what were your interests? Like, what did you think your future held for you? Like, what did you get excited about?
What I enjoyed most was playing sports. That was my way to escape the reality of my upbringing and the environment.
Yep.
I was a fairly good athlete, played a lot of baseball. That was my primary sport. Uh, I would go down into this small little town and play basketball, just a pickup game. But baseball was my passion, and it was just a means for me to escape the household and the reality of my upbringing.
So you love sports, you're playing baseball, and that's a good outlet for a lot of kids who maybe are in situations like yours where you you make friends and you work as a team and you can have mentors and things like that. Is like was that part of your experience?
Absolutely. I didn't have a father figure growing up in my life, and my mother was, as I said, with three jobs. She did the best job she could,
Of course.
and so for me, it was finding some sort of sense of community, and that was on the baseball diamond, and that was with my teammates and some of my other friends that I had.
And as you got older, did you were sports part of your life all the way through high school and into graduation?
Yes, through high school and college as well. I participated in sports recreationally,
Yep.
but I really enjoyed it. I started to take exercise a little bit more seriously and stay in shape. Anything I can do to escape sort of the trauma that I experienced as a child.
Right. And it was it was probably at a time. You're a little bit older than me, I think. And but even when I was young, like mental health in children wasn't necessarily the priority that it is today. Like it isn't something that people took as seriously. So I'm guessing that trauma that you were experiencing, that wasn't resolved for you, at least not at that time, or it wasn't something that was maybe focused on either by your mom or your teachers or other adults that were around you.
Yeah, so I'm 55, so I did not resolve my childhood trauma until about age 46.
Yeah.
And that contributed to a lot of my maladaptive behaviors and to my addictions later in my adult life. I don't use that as an excuse. I don't play the victim role. I take full responsibility for all of my poor choices, and yeah, I don't. And the trauma just contributed, and that's all it did. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that made the poor choices.
And so when did you how did you transition into college? Like when you left home, like what was that part of your journey?
So I went to 3 colleges, so that was very consistent with the pattern of growing up. We moved from apartment to apartment. There was no sort of housing stability, and with college, I went to CW Post my freshman year, transferred to SUNY Albany. I actually thought that's when I sort of like dabbled in gambling.
Hmm.
A fraternity brother of my fraternity brother, excuse me, and I decided, you know what? Let's become bookies. Bookies always win. Well, we were the only bookies on campus for the 2 weeks that we did this that lost, 'cause we didn't understand you have to, there's a vig and this and that. And so I actually left Albany because, we had a $10,000 balance, and 5,000 was his balance, 5,000 was my balance. And for a college student, especially me growing up poor, that was a lot of money,
Yep.
and I couldn't pay the debt. So I left school and called up my mother who had moved to San Francisco, and I asked if I can come live with her and her husband and go to finish school for my last year and a half at San Francisco State, which is what I did.
Okay. So gambling is so that came up early. I mean, that came up pretty early in your life, as an adult, I guess. Did you know about your father's history at that point?
I did. I did. I knew my father was a gambling addict. I knew he was an addict, like a cocaine addict and other addictions. And I never thought I would turn up to be like him or turn out to be like him. And unfortunately, I turned out to be much worse than him. I'm the one that I committed the white collar crime. I'm the one that hurt so many people. And today I miss my dad, even though he passed away in February of 2017. I miss him more now that he's passed, and really didn't get to spend quality time with him when he was alive. And uh, I don't carry resentments, but I do miss him.
Yep. Yeah. So you moved to San Francisco and you finished your school there. So then what did you study?
So I studied accounting. I have a Bachelor of Science in accounting. So I have 7 cousins that are in my family. So I kind of was destined to be an accountant. That was the only real subject that resonated well with me.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I graduated college, I called up one of my 7 cousins who happened to have been one of the top business managers in the entertainment space, specializing in music. I asked him if I can come work for him. He said, "No, you're irresponsible. You're immature. What do you know about, business management? Why don't you go work in an accounting firm, hone your analytical skills, and when I think you're ready, I'll give you a call." So I did that. I worked in the financial district of San Francisco for a small sole practitioner CPA firm.
Mm-hmm.
It was the best advice I ever received because I really did learn a lot and was able to hone my analytical skills. And in 1995, he called and said, "You're ready. Why don't you move down with your wife and my oldest son at that time?" And we did. We drove down, and that was the start of getting into the entertainment business management world.
Oh, cool. So I was also a CPA for a short time. And did you, I mean, it sounds like a lot of accountants in your family. So you kind of knew kind of the potential that it had. I didn't have any accountants in my family. But I had a friend whose dad was a CPA, and he had a nice life. They had a great life. They had a nice house, and they went on nice trips and stuff. And so like that was definitely something appealing. But it sounds like you had, even in your extended family, you had, some role models, and that steered you in a pretty good direction at that time.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for the extended family because I have a beautiful extended family, and I love my cousins. I love, my extended family and I are both my mom, mostly on my mom's side,
Yep.
and I get along really well.
Great. And so, all right. So you said it's 95 that your cousin called you and said, okay, you've been cutting your teeth. Why don't you come down to Los Angeles? And so what was that like? That must've been exciting.
It was super exciting. I mean, I'm not enamored by the entertainment community in terms of the celebrities. I don't put them up on a pedestal. And
Right.
I think that's what helped me become successful because they knew that I wasn't a yes business manager. So we all put up on the same socks and shoes the same way.
Yep.
They're no different than you and I. So that helped me attract some really great clients. In the beginning, in 1995, I went to work for my cousin. I wasn't ready to be a business manager, but I needed to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted the word nepotism associated with me. So I was the first one in and the last one to leave. I got paid very little money, but I looked at it like it was an investment in my future and my family's future, and learning from one of the best in my cousin, whatever he was willing to pay, it was like going to grad school and getting some money.
Yeah. And so what kind of work were you doing that early work? Like what kind of things were you doing?
When I started working for him, he's like, "Why don't you to just go into the file room and read everyone's files, learn how to document, learn how to reconcile, learn some of the music language, learn
Hmm.
about touring." And so I spent a lot of time reading. I spent a lot of time asking for questions because I think today I don't profess to know something if I don't know it or to know,
Hmm.
so, and I encouraged my staff when I ultimately became a partner at another firm to do the same thing. So I asked a lot of questions. I became curious and I just really wanted to be a sponge and learn. And then in 1999, his firm was acquired by Chase Manhattan Bank, now JP Morgan. He asked me if I wanted to get into family wealth management. I said, "Cuz I love you for the opportunity, but no, thank you. I'd like to stay in business management." And the next day, I joined another firm, GSO Business Management. Michael Oppenheim, he was my favorite partner. Um, and he hired me on the spot, and he also mentored me. Fortunately, he passed away in the beginning of last year, and he was my mentor, and I miss him dearly. But it took me, I started off with, call it B-level clients.
Hmm.
And then I got a lucky break in 2000 with a band called Linkin Park.
Yep.
They were a
I
new
remember.
artist. Yeah, they were a new artist at the time with Hybrid Theory about to come out. And they interviewed several business managers and they retained me. And that was like the crossroad in my career because once Linkin Park took off and they took off very fast, I started to receive calls daily from agents, managers, and lawyers asking if I'd be interested in working with their client. And I'm grateful for Linkin Park. They also taught me a lot about the music business.
Yeah. So I'm curious about. So it sounds like you, as far as developing the specialization into the music business, that just was kind of happenstance because that was your cousin's expertise. Is that right?
That's right.
And then but that it seemed like that you kind of locked into it. You said, no, this is great. The business is interesting, and you obviously did you have kind of an affinity for music, or what was it about? What was it about it that you really kind of took to?
It's a good question. My friends always laugh at me because honestly, I didn't take an affinity to music. But I just loved being a business manager in the
Mm.
sense that people would always ask the clients when they would come, what's the difference between a CPA and a business manager? Firstly, anyone can call themselves a business manager, but the ones who have a CPA, they can really analyze a person's financial situation by just looking at their financial statement. Their financial statement is like a script, like a movie script, but about someone's finances. A CPA is, a lot of CPAs mainly just do some tax work. I didn't enjoy doing the tax work. We had a tax department, we had a royalty department, a risk management department. The bookkeepers paid the bills, received the income, and that financial statement is what I enjoyed the most, helping clients meet and achieve their financial goals and improving tour profit margins and all the other areas that clients you know, worked within merchandise,
Right.
everything.
Yeah. And so what do you, or looking back, like you said, after you kind of, you took on Lincoln Park and you had some success with them, was there something specific that they said, it's like, well, and then your phone starts ringing. What were you good at? Like, what did you do that all of a sudden it started like snowballing in terms of the opportunity? Was there something, yeah, was there something you can point to that you said, this is why I was good at what I was doing?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I was authentic. I mean, I know it sounds ironic because I'm sure we're going to talk later about me not being so authentic, right?
Of course,
But
yes.
I was really authentic. I really connected with them personally. I was really accessible, probably too accessible. Um, but I loved what I did. I mean, what made me special, I think, was I did because I went in San Francisco and worked for a sole practitioner. I really did have the analytical skills that many business managers don't have. I also can speak with, clients, and communicate and articulate and be curious and understand their needs and help them achieve their needs. But I was really good at just helping them achieve whatever it is their goals were. And I just want to be clear, it wasn't just me. I mean, I had a staff. And the staff really was just as important as I was, if not more important, because without them, I couldn't do my job.
Right. And, some of our listeners, I think, work in kind of the show business space, but most don't. And I think that's probably kind of a common misconception is that, I think when it comes to like artists, music, whether they're musicians or they're actors or writers or directors, whatever it isn't as though, there's a lot of people working behind the scenes to make those people successful. And as like you said, you've got a tax department, because the artists, they want to just focus on what it is that they do. And part of what you get to do is part of the team that, helps them succeed. And I think that's just something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand about the business. And so it's an interesting, I think it's a fascinating field. I mean, I like all kinds of facets of entertainment. And so I guess I take a kind of a keen interest in all these parts that go into it. So it's the late 90s. You're at GSO, and you've got Linkin Park, and now you're getting all the calls. So like what's kind of the next stage of your career at GSO when business really starts coming your way?
I mean, obviously it created wealth for me at that time.
Yep.
And for the firm. And
how big is GSO? What size of firm is it? How many people?
So since my crime, they merged with another practice, another firm. But at the time, we were probably one of the top 3 boutique business management firms. There was me and 3 other partners. So we had 4 partners. Okay. And we all had our own book of business, but we collaborated every week on our respective clients. How can we improve our service and so on and so forth. Listen, I got lucky. I got really lucky. I wasn't a rocket scientist. I just happened to be really good at the skills that are required to be an excellent business manager, with the one caveat, until I started my criminal behavior.
And what year now, when you joined GSO, did you become a partner straight away, or did that happen later?
No, it happened about 3-4 years after I joined the firm. I needed to still grow. I needed to still learn. And that's what Michael Oppenheim took me under his wings. And then Bernie, another partner, took me under his wings. And, I really learned from really great guys. I was really fortunate. To me, learning is everything. Knowledge is power. And I just wanted to be a sponge. I just love learning and love knowledge. And it really helped me become who I was at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're having success. So at this point, are your addictions, are they present in your life? Like how is that part of your life? Like, where is it at that time?
So my addictions didn't start until about 2010.
Okay.
So I had a 6-year run. So between, in the early 2000s, when Linkin Park started in 2000, as I said earlier, I was all about the family and being professional and growing my book of business. And then 2010 comes, and that's when my spiraling out of control started.
Right. So before we get to that, I want to, if I remember the timeline right, Alanis Morissette became your client was it around 2008?
Yes. She was my first big name client at that time. And then followed by more. Yes.
Okay. And so what's interesting is that I made a note to this to myself, but this is like a dozen years after Jagged Little Pill. So she's been that record was a massive success. One of the biggest, selling records of all time. And so what were the circumstances of her coming to you, so long after that initial like massive success of hers?
So she fired her business manager at the time, and she took, about, I'm going to make this up, about half a dozen to a dozen business management meetings to see who would be her new business manager. And I know she has a song that are ironic, but it is what's ironic here is that the reason she hired me is I was the only one of the candidates that she was considering for business management to bring to the meeting visual aids. like source
Oh,
documents to
okay.
present to her. Here's what a tour budget looks like. Here's what I do to manage your monthly budget personally and or professionally. And she was impressed with that. And I was impressed with her. You know, she put up on a whiteboard, here's sort of like the organizational structure of Alanis Morissette.
Mm-hmm.
And she's super intellect. She's really brilliant, and she didn't deserve what I did, but we could talk about that later.
Yep.
But so as a result of my transparency at that time, she retained my services, and we had a wonderful relationship. Um, I would see her mostly every month, and that continued even through my addiction.
And so that must have been huge for you, and also even and for GSO too. I mean, I'm sure you had other big names, but Alanis, I think at that point, even though it had been so long since her initial success, I mean, signing somebody like that must have been great. You must have felt great.
Yeah, it really felt great, and it to some degree, it accelerated my high ego. You know, I landed my first real client. I was really heavy in the R&B and hip hop world. Before that, I was known as that business manager for that genre. But yes, Alanis, excuse me, really helped me get the opportunities that I had. You know, that Lincoln Park being the next one, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I really, like I said, I really cared about her. But we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later.
Yeah. Okay. So 2010, you mentioned it. It's like that's when maybe some problems with gambling, or maybe not problems, at least at the outset, but gambling and drugs. Like, was there something that precipitated that behavior? Was there something that happened either in your personal life or in your professional life that caused you to kind of start?
So I was coaching my three sons in all their youth sports, and I think it was my middle son when I was coaching him. My assistant coach is like a quasi-professional poker player, and he asked me if I want to bet on sports. I said sure, and I obviously placed this very small bet, and then I placed another small bet and another bet. It became larger and larger, and progressively, I became addicted to gambling. I wasn't addicted to drugs until probably 2015. You know, the last, when I really stopped gambling and really started to subconsciously try and kill myself. I have coronary artery disease, so starting to do cocaine every day, 24 hours a day, and waking up with wet sheets on my bed, with my heart pounding wasn't a very smart move by me. So
Right.
I just probably couldn't take. I know I couldn't take. For 6 years, I lived a life I hope nobody ever experiences, where every night I went to bed, and if I heard a siren, I got scared I was going to come get arrested. And I lived in fear. I couldn't sleep. And so I ultimately, toward the end, I resorted to becoming addicted and dependent on cocaine and all the risky behaviors that are associated with cocaine. And it was just awful. But thankfully, I was able to identify reasons to live, and my three beautiful sons, and at the time, my wife and my mother and my stepfather. And grateful for being alive today.
And I think, I mean, gambling is something that I think, I don't know, you can keep me honest here, but like in terms of like addiction, alcohol gets a lot of attention, and drugs obviously get a lot of attention. And I think gambling is generally known that is something that plagues people and troubles people. But I think compared to some of the other addictions that people face, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's maybe not as well understood, kind of just like the broader population. What was it about what was it about gambling for you that, do you have a sense of like what was the compulsion of it? Like, were you addicted to the losing, or you were addicted to kind of the adrenaline for the possibility of winning? Like, how do you, when you look back on that, what was it about for you?
Yeah, and before I answer, I'll just add to what you were saying earlier. Like, so gambling is a behavioral addiction, and it's got the highest correlation with suicidality, because you're dealing with someone's finances. And so, I never enjoyed gambling. I mean, once I took from Alanis, the first, I'm making this up, call it just dollars.
Yep.
The idea was I'm going to borrow it from her and I'm going to pay her back this next week. Now, I had my own money because I was making good money, but I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing, including my wife at the time. So I'm like, let me just borrow this. Well, that just led to become immersed in gambling every day, calling my bookie literally every day for 6 years. And I did not enjoy the highs, and I certainly did not enjoy, and I certainly hated the lows. Um, I was chasing to pay back Alanis, and then ultimately chasing to pay back a handful of other clients. It was something I didn't enjoy, and I wish I would have had the courage to ask for help early.
Yeah. Now, what was the situation that were you just in a hole with your, did you have a debt that you needed to pay? And that was what precipitated the first time that you took money from Alanis?
No, it really wasn't about the money until I started to really lose money. Like that first time I shared with you, I was just a terrible gambler.
Yeah.
There's no good gambler, but I would bet on every game on the board on Saturday with college football. And I wouldn't just bet on the game. I'd bet on the totals, I'd parlay and tease and the over-unders. I mean, you can't win that way. But I was so determined to pay her back and then to pay back, like I said, the other clients that I embezzled from. That was my motivation. I hated it. I really hated gambling, but because I was insecure and not comfortable with myself, I was afraid to ask for help and to be honest with my struggles.
And did your wife, your business partners, did they know anything about this?
No, nobody knew a single thing.
So it was a secret that you are keeping to yourself. And so that is, I mean, that's an incredibly hard thing to have to do.
Yeah, I was living a double life.
Yeah.
I mean, I was truly living a double life. I know that's used often, but for me, it applies. I was to the outer world, to the entertainment space, and to everyone in my community. I was the successful business manager. Inside, I was low self-esteem, insecure, in fear of getting caught, violating my client's fiduciary responsibility that I had. And I just hated myself. And all I wanted to do was pay him back and move on with my career and try and be more present for my kids and for my wife and for my mother and my stepfather and everybody.
Yep. And so and you mentioned that, you were kind of revered within, the entertainment community. You were recognized at some point, I believe I saw it in the Hollywood Reporter, you were recognized as like a top business manager. And so when you say that, you aren't just saying that. You were recognized by your peers and by trade press that, covered your industry.
Yeah, and the truth is, the recognition isn't because of who I am, because really nobody cares about Jonathan Schwartz. Even then, it was because of my client roster. You're only as
Right.
good as your clients, right? And I was fortunate enough to work with some of the best clients in music, film, TV, and professional sports. And it's because of them that I was recognized as a successful business manager.
Yep. Okay. So how long does this go on? Because it's if I understand it right, you got yourself in a position where it's just like, okay, I borrowed a little bit of money and I used it to gamble and I lost and I borrowed a little bit more. And so it's just kind of this vicious cycle. So how long does this kind of, and you're desperate because you want to do right by your clients, because you have this, it sounds strange. It probably sounds strange to people listening, but what you're saying is like, because you cared about your clients so much, you wanted to make good by them and and pay them back. But because of the nature of the circumstances, you couldn't just tell them, you couldn't ask for help. So how long does this go on?
6 years, every day for 6 years. I turned over my phone records to the federal government when I was ultimately sentenced, prior to sentencing, excuse me. And every day for 6 years, I showed them that I called the bookie, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a real degenerate. And like I said, I was chasing it to make the clients whole. Now, by the way, the clients did get whole ultimately. And that's never really been reported by the media because the media doesn't like to portray, the good side of a story, if you will.
Right.
But it doesn't make what I did wrong right. But I'm glad that they got paid back.
Yeah. And at any point during those 6 years, were there ever any close calls? Was there anything that ever occurred to you where it's like, oh, so and so almost found out, or one of my partners asked me something that could have maybe uncovered what was going on, or was it pretty? Did you keep it contained to yourself pretty well during that entire time?
There was a time about probably 6 months before I was caught, where my clients heard that I took my partners, excuse me, knew that I was taking money, but I lied to the bank every week to get the money on behalf of the client, and I lied to my partners why client A, B, C, or D needed the money. At some point, about 6 months prior to getting caught, maybe a little longer, they asked what Alanis did with this recent cash withdrawal. And I lied to them and said it's because she was investing in a cannabis business. A lot of my former employees have come to me subsequent to my sentencing, and when I came back into society in 2020, and said that they knew, the partners knew, but because I was the rainmaker, they never really pushed me hard enough to find out the truth. And you know what? To be honest, I should have told them the truth. My partners were amazing guys, and they, like my clients, didn't deserve the lying and the deceit and the manipulation that I presented from 2010 for 6 years.
I want to ask you something a little bit about how the relationships work for a business manager and like in the entertainment world. So if I remember right, because you are able to make these cash withdrawals on behalf of your clients, is that a typical arrangement? I'm just curious if that's something that is just a common practice, because if that's the case, then it just seems like there's a lot of these clients would be vulnerable at some key places. So I'm just curious about the typical practices and for business managers in the entertainment world.
Yeah, it's a great question. And when my book comes out, you're going to see me disrupt the entertainment space by disclosing a lot of things that are wrong within the entertainment community, and to ask clients, celebrities, to be more proactive in their financial affairs. Because yes, it's very common for business managers to have power of attorney to pay the client's bills, because a lot of the clients, are on the road, whether it's the music clients touring or the actors or actresses, filming in another country or another state, a movie, or athletes playing in their hometown or wherever they're playing. So we were trusted advisors. Obviously, I violated their trust, but we were, in general, business managers are trusted advisors, and they have the power of attorney. Now, there are safeguards a business manager should create where clients can see, how their money is being spent. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of clients don't ask for that information. Had Alanis asked for a source, I would go to Alanis's house every month and present an Excel spreadsheet that I created. Had she asked me, and you asked me earlier, I would get scared every time I walked into her house for a meeting, that she would ask me for a source document, i.e. a bank statement,
Yep.
that reconciled with my spreadsheet. Had she done that, I would have been caught right then and there, but she never asked, and I certainly didn't present one. But that happens a lot in the business management world right now, where there's not enough transparency. And I encourage celebrities, if any of you listen to this, to really be proactive and ask for source documents.
Right. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, because in your experience, did the majority of your clients, did they just want you to take care of all the money stuff because they didn't want to deal with it? And is that typical for the entertainment world, or is it more of a balanced mix of like, oh no, there's plenty of clients where they're super involved and they do want to know these kinds of things, or is it really lopsided in the direction of they really just want all the financial stuff to be taken care of, and they're putting all that trust in somebody like who you were at that time?
It's a great question. Today's celebrities, especially the young artists today, treat their music or acting or professional sports as a business. I see it more in music than I did on the professional sports side. It was a business. So they were very proactive. And, like for example, Linkin Park, they had 6 band members. Many of them could have been doctors and lawyers. They were the first time I got on their tour bus, I was thinking sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I get on their tour bus and they're playing video games and they're nerds. That's
Yeah.
who they were. And
Yeah.
that's why they were so successful, because they were all humble and they all had high expectations for me and how I would help them with their finances. And they had very strong internal controls and source documents that they wanted to see. And like I said earlier, they helped shape me to become a better business manager. And many artists today are much like that. It's no longer sex, drugs, and rock and roll for many, but of course, there's still out there young and immature that resort to the sex, drugs, and rock and roll era.
Yeah, and it sounds like in Alanis's case, it sounds like she was engaged, like you saw her every month and she asked for things, but it was almost like she needed to go one step further to really, she was trusting, but she wasn't verifying 100%. And it sounds like that's where there was maybe a gap in her. Well, that's what left her vulnerable in that case.
Yeah, I mean, correct. I mean, I should have presented her the source documents, but I knew I was stealing money at that time,
Yep.
and so I didn't. But she, like you said, she put her trust in me, and I violated that. But you're 100% correct.
So it's coming to the end of this, and your partners ask you about, I think you said, they ask you about some cash withdrawals, and you say Alanis, she wants to do this. I think you said was it a recreational marijuana at that time, or was it medical? It was a marijuana business of some kind.
Yes.
And so then there's a meeting amongst some of her team and then the GSO team, right? Like what happens at that stage when, like, it's about ready to, it's kind of a come to Jesus meeting, right? At that point.
So before that, if the crossroad of when I got caught or how I got caught was, I also represented Beyonce, and she was starting her Lemonade tour in Tampa Bay. And I was there to make sure that the production costs and all of her costs were managed appropriately and help her with a profit margin. And Beyonce is one of the hardest working people I've ever met.
Yep.
And I get a call from one of my partners saying that they received a call from Alanis's business managers asking what you did with $4.6 million of Alanis's money. And now I was still in denial and uber scared. And I just came up with a lie and said, again, same thing I told the banks, she invested it in a cannabis business. And so shortly after that, I had to leave and come back. And this is now 2016, May. My wife and I are celebrating our anniversary in Santa Barbara. And on May 8th, my former partner calls me and says, we need you to come do a lie detector test. Will you do it? You said you would. Now, mind you, I'm in the hotel room snorting cocaine and gambling. And now I have to come clean with my wife, now my ex-wife, and tell her the truth. And because, again, nobody knew, including her. And she was supportive. She's like, let's Google how to beat a lie detector test. So we Googled how to beat a lie detector test. And and the next day, now on May 8th, I drive down to Beverly Hills from Santa Barbara to meet with this former FBI polygrapher. And I'm doing lines of cocaine. Who's going to beat a lie detector test? Doing lines of cocaine on your way to the lie detector test, but Jonathan Schwartz. And I placed my last bet because my sober date's May 9th, 2016. So May 8th, that happened. And I went there with an ego. I went there high as a kite. I went there believing I could beat this system. And after the exam, I called my attorney, who's Nathan Hochman, who's now the Los Angeles district attorney. And he said, Jonathan, you failed the test worse than anybody that polygrapher has ever worked with. So that moment, my access to GSO Business Management's computers was no longer.
It was shut off.
Now I'm scared. I'm about to go to prison for the rest of my life. That's what came to my head, catastrophizing. And so that was that crossroad for me.
And so I want to go one step back because I remember this part of the story, and I think we skipped over it a little bit. Alanis, at some point, she confronted you. She asked you for something, and you refused to provide her. I don't know what it was, if it was a bank statement or if it was a personal financial statement or what. But she asked you for something, you didn't provide it, and she asked you several times subsequent to that, and that kind of unraveled the relationship, and she ultimately fired you and went to another business manager.
So before, so she fired me before she had, asked me those questions that you mentioned. She
Okay,
fired
got it.
me in 2015 because I wasn't giving her the attention that she once had because, truthfully, because she knew that I had bigger name clients at that time. No
Okay,
disrespect. And she
right.
felt I was giving them more attention than her. And she was right. Unfortunately, she was right. And then later on, sometime in the first quarter, 2016, before May, when I was asked to do the polygraph test, her business manager called me. Ironically, there again, she hired my cousin, the one who I worked for and started my career. He came back from Chase Manhattan Bank to start business management again. And she went to his firm, and his partner, Howard, called me and said, "What happened with this money?" I lied to him again, but I'll get you something to show proof. I'll have her show you I'll show you what Alanis signed. Alanis didn't sign anything.
Right.
So I continued to lie. And that's ultimately why, that's when I got caught, when I just couldn't prove.
Right, because which is when, and it happens with in all kinds of businesses, where if a client leaves and goes to another service provider or whatever, it's common practice to say, "Hey, can you provide all of your records to assist in the transition from one professional to another?" So what was happening wasn't unusual, right?
Right. And to add to that, I was so careless and wanted to get caught so badly that when that call came in 2015, fourth quarter, I just told the bookkeeper, just give them all that they need, knowing darn well that that's going to lead to them doing an audit and see that the money is just shown as a cash withdrawal, not allocated to any specific expense. So I knew subconsciously that I just wanted to get caught.
And when that happened, did you feel relieved,
When I
or were you?
got,
Yeah. Yeah,
sorry,
well, when you knew you were providing the materials that were going to ultimately lead to being caught, did you feel relieved at that point, or were you still kind of catastrophizing? And did it only happen when you were confronted with the evidence?
the latter. I was catastrophizing still. I knew inevitably I'd get caught, and I was just thinking about how much I was going to embarrass my children and my wife and everybody
Mhm.
else and the entertainment space, this community I lived in. And I knew it was inevitable, but, people said, why don't you, or I said to myself, why don't you leave the country? I'm not going to leave the country. So
Right.
I'm just going to accept whatever the consequences are at this point. And then ultimately,
Yep.
when I got that call to take the lie detector test, and then failed, that was the moment I really started to get scared, like thinking 20, 30 years prison,
Right.
and not being able to see my kids. It really was painful.
Right. Okay, so you give the worst performance on a lie detector test in the history of lie detector tests. and so then what happens next? Or like, and then you don't have to go into the painstaking detail, but essentially what's kind of the next phase, like in terms of like being charged and the resolution, and how did that go?
So Nathan immediately contacted the prosecutor that was assigned to my case and worked out a plea agreement for 4 to 6 years.
Mhm.
Um, when I heard that it would likely be 5, I was scared. We were asking for a year and a half. Um, at sentencing on May 3rd, 2017, the hardest thing I ever experienced in my entire life was seeing on the side of the federal government my ex-wife now and my middle son. And I just sitting in the room waiting for the judge to tell me how many years, and then seeing them was really hard. The judge could have deviated and given me more than 6 years. I'm grateful that she didn't, but she gave me 6 years while the federal government wanted 5, and it seemed like an eternity at that time, and I was, obviously, upset, and, but, as I've had time to reflect, I deserved my 6 years. I didn't serve all 6 years, but I deserved my sentencing of 6 years. I deserved over 8 years of giving my life to the government. I'm the one that made the poor choices, and you know, I've I don't have, there aren't just those hand called 5, 6 direct victims of my crime. There's also the indirect clients who put their trust in me, although I didn't take from them, embarrassed them. There's also my family. There's also people in my community. I've hurt so many people because of my poor choices, and I don't live in my past, but I don't forget my past. And today I'm on a whole new journey of recovery and helping others.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about that. I definitely want to talk about that. Can you just say a little bit? Restitution was part of your pleading guilty as well. Like, that's something that we, like, in a lot of the stories that we do on this podcast, the restitution piece is always part of it. How did that work for you? Because it's millions of dollars that you're ordered to repay. Is that something that you're in the process of doing, or how does the restitution part of it work?
So I'm very transparent. So I have an $8.65 million restitution.
Yep.
The call it 1.7, the extra money aside from what I embezzled was what it cost my firm. At least that's what they said it cost them to hire retain attorneys, forensic accountants, the loss of some clients. But I'll give you more of those details in my book. That'll be a lot more specific. But I pay every month. I make a payment to him, even in prison. If it was $25, I started to pay that back. When I came home, the government assessed a larger amount. I paid that, and I continue to pay every month. I go to the bank, get the cashier check, and send it off. It's no longer with the criminal division because I'm off probation, but I still owe the restitution, and I'll still keep my obligation to pay, what they asked me to pay. I mean, today I don't make money, but I'm a lot of money, but I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about your time in prison and the beginning of your sobriety. So when did that happen? Did you get sober before you reported to prison, or did you get sober in prison? Like, what was kind of the beginning of that?
I got sober about 14 months before, or 15 months before I was sentenced. So May 9, 2016, I went, after failing that lie detector test, I became sober. Worked the program, not as committed as I probably should have been early in my recovery, but I still made it because I had a great sponsor and some great people around me. Carried that abstinence all the way through to today, but it was hard. I mean, it's in prison was really hard to be sober, because I don't know what people think about prisons, but I can tell you that there's a lot of contraband that's brought into prison, and very easy for people to get drugs and alcohol, and even gamble. But thankfully, I was able to use my time in prison to be productive and wise, and to learn from my mistakes, and to know what I wanted to do when I, finally was let out of discharge from prison, if you will. And that was to help other people. But prison was hard. I mean, I was at a camp, which is the lowest level in terms of security. I met some really amazing people, some of which I talk to today. I taught a victim impact program in prison. It was a 7 or 9 week program, and inmates, about 10 inmates would apply for it. And it was really to teach, or to help the inmates understand that they have victims of their crime, whether it's white collar or otherwise. And a lot of the drug dealers had some challenges understanding that who their victims were. So, for example, white collar guys, for the most part, even though they had trouble identifying victims and acknowledging they had victims, the drug dealers said, "Well, wait a second, Jonathan. All I did was sell them drugs." I said, "Precisely." And if they said, "If I didn't sell drugs, someone else would have sold them drugs." True, but you sold them drugs. You don't know who became addicted. You don't know who overdosed. So you have victims out there. And once they got that and accepted that, listening to them talk to their loved ones on the phone changed dramatically. Instead of hearing them yell on the phones, they would be so kind to their partners and tell them how much they miss and love them.
So it sounds like, I mean, I think prison is something that those of us that have never been to prison, like, as you know, it's in a way, it's kind of romanticized in TVs and movies, but like for you, I mean, you got sober and you're processing your behavior. Like that does feel like, because you're really just in there by yourself and you kind of, you're reckoning with your choices. And then you're also, because of what you just told us about, you know, still having access to drugs and alcohol and gambling, you're also trying to stay sober. Was that a difficult, you said it was a difficult time. Was sobriety difficult for you during that time as well? Or
No.
was the experience of prison really kind of that was kind of the majority of the difficulty?
It was definitely the majority of the difficulty. It was not the
Okay.
sobriety. I knew I was committed when I knew my consequences before I went to prison, which included getting sentenced, right? I'm risk adverse. I'm a nerd today. I'm a super proud nerd.
Yeah.
But prison was hard because I had a type A personality. You have no control over the outside world. I wasn't able to, God forbid, my younger son at the time, who was still in high school, middle school, and then high school. I couldn't even ask his teachers to send me his report card. I couldn't ask his mom because we didn't talk. How's his health condition? Is there anything? I had no control, and that really was hard for me to accept. And once I accepted that, probably 6 months into my sentence, or excuse me, my time in prison, I realized it's time to surrender to my higher power, and it's time for me to figure out how to be more productive here. So I would wake up early in the morning. I had a great job in education. I worked in a computer lab, um, and I would be the first one to get up in the morning. And as soon as they opened, call it our little wing, I was able to go outside, walk on the track, um, and then I would read a lot. I never read so much in my life as I read in prison. And I tried to use my time wisely. And there were days that I cried, and there were days that I didn't cry. And I just couldn't wait for the time that I was going to be let go, and so I could reenter society because I was ready. I've learned from my mistakes.
And so when that date finally came, like, did you have a plan? You'd had all that time to think? When you were released, you were released in 2020, if I remember right. Is that right?
Yes, I was
Did I have that
released
right?
April 16th, 2020 because of COVID. So I was released like 9 months early.
Okay. And so at that point, what was your plan? What did you think you were going to do?
So I was with a woman who I thought I was my fiance at the time, but she was cheating on me while in college. So she was required to pick me up. So she picked me up, and she told me I'm sleeping on her couch, and I'm now being on home confinement for 16 months with an ankle monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out that she was cheating on me this whole time, um, and reasons why I was sleeping on her couch, I just called my mom and asked her to please co-sign a studio apartment for me, which had to be in the same apartment building as this woman because that's where my probation address was. And I
Okay.
could see her for 9 months every day, my ex, the fiance at the time, with her boyfriend on the balcony. And I was sitting playing self-pity on the couch every day, like, woo me. But this might sound funny to those that don't understand recovery, but when I turned it over to my higher power, there was a message I got from a higher power that really helped me. And it was, Jonathan, you cheated on your wife. So now you know what it feels like to be cheated on by a woman. And that's the lesson I needed to learn. So today in my relationships with women I date, I assure them the last thing I'm going to do is cheat on you. Like, I'm much more mature. And I think I'm an emotionally present person today for them. But it was really hard coming back into society, not just because of that, but as a felon, which I still am labeled as a felon, who's well educated. I couldn't get a job. I had to
Right.
take a job at Dunkin' Donuts of all places. And I worked there for 3 months, got fired because I wasn't cleaning the floors and mopping the cabinets well. And it was really tough for me to swallow, but it really brought me to be a more humble person. And humility is what this program is about. And today, I have a very small ego because all people have egos. To what degree is different. But I practice humility and gratitude every day, and I'm grateful for where I am. So that led me to go to study addiction studies,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to addiction studies school. I got my KDAC as a certified addiction drug counselor, and then I went to marriage and family therapy grad school to become a therapist and that specializes in addiction and trauma. So right now I work at Altus Rehab in Encino, a 6-bed luxury detox and residential treatment center, and I'm a program director here. I'm a sponsor to people, and I work at another treatment center called the Chabad Treatment Center in LA, where I do teletherapy with their clients. And it's just such a joy every day to know that at least you're trying to make a positive impact on their lives. And that's why I say today I'm the happiest I've ever been, because I'm doing something that I love and I'm contributing to help people not make the same mistakes that I made.
Right. Right. I know enough about recovery to be dangerous, and I know that making amends is an important part of the recovery process. Have you been able to make amends with your clients and your family?
Well, that's a great question. Yes, I made amends to my family. Um, my 2 of my 3 sons don't really want to have a relationship with me at this time. It's 9 years later. My younger son and I talk every day. My older son does see me about 4 or 5 times a year. He calls me Jonathan. That hurts. But again, it's their journey, and it's their journey because I put them in the situation to feel the way they feel. I respect that when the time is right, my higher power will put them back into my life. I miss them very much. My mom is battling stage 4 lung cancer for over a decade. I speak to her every day for 36, for a minute and tell her I love her because you never know. Um,
Right.
she's forgiven me. My stepfather's forgiven me. A lot of people have forgiven me, but I have not made amends to my former partners. One who unfortunately passed away early last year. He was Michael Oppenheim. He was my favorite partner. I miss him so much. I thought about making amends to his wife and daughter, but you don't make amends when it could cause harm to others. So I've been advised not to make amends to her and to the daughter. Now, my other former partners, I do want to make amends to, and I hope I'm able to do that in the next month or so. I wasn't able to make amends until I completed probation, which was on August 16th of last year. So
Okay.
now I'm starting to talk to my sponsor about making amends to them. And you don't make amends with the expectation that people are always going to receive your amends well. You just
Right.
really do it for yourself. So I do want to make amends. I'm even going to try to reach out to Alanis and 5 other clients or so that I embezzled from, and some of the other professionals in the entertainment community, and try my best to make amends because that's important for me.
Yeah. Jonathan, this has been great. I really appreciate you sharing your story. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to do what you're doing, because I don't know, it's lots of people aren't able to do what you do because of whether it's shame or something else. I think being able to talk about it is definitely going to help people. And you're helping people in your work. As you said, you're the happiest you've ever been. And it's because you're getting to help people that have, that are experiencing things that are similar to what you experienced. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Caleb, so much for having me here, and I appreciate you giving me this platform to be vulnerable and transparent.
Okay, that was me and Jonathan Todd Schwartz. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to him. Best of luck to Jonathan. I don't know. It is quite a story. Sad, but also hopeful. So yeah, best of luck, Jonathan. Lessons. What did we learn? Well, gambling is bad. Gambling can lead to fraud. We've talked about that a lot. It comes up in a lot of our episodes. The only other fraudster that we've talked to on this podcast so far, Nathan Muller, he also was a gambling addict and also, I believe, an alcoholic, as I recall. And so though that is something that is a huge factor in a lot of fraud cases, and this is about as typical or as simple, as straightforward as an example of someone with a gambling addiction who committed fraud to really, in Jonathan's telling of it, is he wanted to make good on his clients. He just borrowed a little money to make some bets, and then he lost it, and he felt responsible. But the only thing that he thought to do was to take more money and gamble that and able to win it back. And that's a vicious cycle. So in any case, yeah, gambling. I think it was Greg. I think Greg used to say on the show, it's like, if anyone on your accounting team, or if you're a celebrity and your business manager likes taking trips to Las Vegas, maybe find another business manager. So that's maybe a big lesson. I think the other thing that was interesting that he talked about was the common practice within the entertainment world for business managers, which is to have a lot of control over access to their clients' bank accounts. That is extremely. If I was a celebrity and I was listening to that, I think I'd go call my business manager right now and say, "Do you have access to all my bank accounts without without my permission? Because if you do, then let's change that, because I just listened to a podcast." That's a huge vulnerability, I think, in this aspect of business management. And I know show business is kind of its own thing, and it is kind of used to doing things its own way, but that's something that people, if they're not looking out for it, hopefully they're looking out for it now. It sounds like some of the younger up and coming, whether it's musicians or actors, it sounds like they're a little bit more engaged as far as the financial piece of it is concerned. But if you're out there and you're listening to this and you want to make sure that you have to okay every single withdrawal made by your business manager, that might be a good thing to do. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of his book. It sounds like he's got some tea to spill on how things are done in show business, but we'll see. Okay, that's it for this episode. And remember, only do cocaine before a lie detector test if you want to fail that lie detector test. Like, no one has ever failed a lie detector test in the history of lie detector tests. If you want to drop us a line, send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com. Oh My Fraud is created, written, produced, and hosted by me, Caleb Newquist. Zach Frank is my co-producer, audio engineer, music supervisor, and loyal Lakers fan. Laura Hobbs did our new artwork. Thank you, Laura. It looks great. I hope you people like it. I thought it looked good. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Earmark, earn CPE in the process. Do that. CPAs, CMAs, whoever you are, get some CPE on Earmark. Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say, "Oh my fraud."